unfriendly neighborhood.
Up until now, I haven't played many mascot horror games, which is a wonder considering how goddamn many there are. The subgenre has only been around for about a decade, but when the doors to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza opened in 2014, so did the floodgates. You've got your Bendies, your Tim Tims, your Frankies, your Muzzies, and your Poppies. Not to mention Freddy's own multitude of descendants. If you didn't know, mascot horror is defined by its antagonist, a character or group of characters who resemble the cartoony, ever-smiling figures of our own childhood media, but have been twisted into malevolent beings that would sooner harm you than hug you. I get the appeal. There's something unnerving about taking the comfort characters of our youth, the mascots who are meant to entertain and educate us in our formative years, and turning them against us. It's the safe made unsafe. They may still have the same friendly face, yet they are anything but a friend. We've seen this trope work outside of games plenty of times, whether it's the Child's Play series or Stephen King's It. Although I don't know who in the history of fucking ever has found clowns to be safe. But mascot horror games in particular exploded in popularity for a couple of reasons. For one, unlike their grislier counterparts, kids can play them. They're usually gore-free and, better yet, cheap to buy. Plus, their titular characters often come with these dense chunks of lore that communities can form around and chip away at for years. This, in turn, allowed an army of streamers and YouTubers to make ad-friendly Let's Plays, further signal-boosting the games. I'm drawn to all sorts of horror, but I guess being chased down by Chuck E. Cheese isn't on my list of phobias, so I never really delved into the genre. As an outsider looking in, a lot of the games look like environmental puzzlers and cat and mouse chase simulators where you have to evade your fuzzy tormentor. And I tend to like horror games where you can fight or flee, not just flee. It's not a knock, just a preference. Although full disclosure, I played a little bit of Poppy Playtime in preparation for this video, and I actually really loved using my wacky, silly hands to grab things like Mr. Fantastic. They're on to something here. But it's part of why My Friendly Neighborhood caught my eye. It's got puzzles, combat, key hunting, item management, and save rooms with a jazzy little tune. We're talking the entire survival horror suite. The love for Resident Evil is evident in its mechanics, but there's also a clear reverence for Bioshock in its world design. It embraces its central gimmick of living puppets run amok, but it never feels gimmicky. There's a lot of thought and care put in every corner of the game, from its vibrant visual identity to its oddball cast of characters. The game has more going for it than what if Sesame Street were evil. It's a heartfelt tale about war and recession, casting a shadow in society, and how empathy and kindness can help pull us back into the light. It's also about 5 hours of shooting puppets. It's completely bloodless, and despite a few startling moments, I wouldn't exactly call it scary. But that kind of makes it the perfect survival horror starter kit. I would also argue that Crow Country serves that role, but that's a video for another day. It has all the hallmarks of the genre without any of the entrails, something you could let your kids play, but has enough depth to make you want to play it first. Seems like we can't go very far in this channel without tripping over a Szymanski or two. Published by Dread XP, My Friendly Neighborhood was developed by John and Evan Szymanski and released in 2023. The name might ring a bell because I covered their brother David's game Butcher's Creek back in January. That and the guy made one of the most popular boomer shooters of all time, but I'm going to pretend it's because you watched my video. They recently joined forces with David to release Secret Agent Wizard Boy and the International Crime Syndicate, which just looks like a shit ton of fun. I don't know what's in the water at the Szymanski household, but considering how good their output is, they should keep drinking it. The game begins in 1993. Despite its cancellation 10 years prior, an old children's show called My Friendly Neighborhood starts broadcasting again, taking over the airwaves. You play as Gordon, a war vet turned surly repairman who's tasked with shutting off the signal at the source, the abandoned city network broadcasting building. Before long, Gordon learns that the broadcast is no accident. In fact, Ricky the Sock doesn't want you to shut off the antenna at all, even if it is playing over the news. A quick thing. The puppets are sentient, and I don't mean that some magical force brought them to life. I think they were always sentient and potentially mass-produced. It's a thing. Just roll with it. Anyway, Ricky gives you a key card and you begin searching the nearby studio. You find more puppets that are just as talkative as Ricky, but not as welcoming.
Who are you? Who are
So you're granted your first weapon, the stenographer. It may not fire bullets, but it'll sure as hell teach the bastards their ABCs. There's actually no way to kill the puppets, you're simply immobilizing them. But any puppet you take out gets right back up when you return to a room. As with most things in life, duct tape fixes that problem. You can tape them up to make sure they stay down, but it's a finite resource, so you have to decide which areas you want to clear of reanimated puppets. It's kind of like how you only have so much kerosene to burn in Resident Evil Remake to prevent zombies from returning as Crimson Heads. Although admittedly the consequences are less dire here. If one of the puppets does manage to get its weird felt hands on you, they'll knock you down, dropping your health to caution status. Luckily, you have two methods of healing. These big old tonics, or one of these healing stations found inside save rooms, so long as you have the tokens to spend. Inventory is limited, but not too limited, letting you Tetris your items around until everything is nice and snug, like in that one game with the dog. You can also unload excess items at these magically linked toolboxes, like in that one game with the dog. The gunplay is solid and so is the melee, but the enemy AI isn't likely to test your FPS chops since all they do is walk at you until you drop them. You can even sneak right around them if they aren't looking your way. The game makes up for their empty-headedness by randomizing where they appear whenever you come back to a room, so they could at least mildly surprise you. Later on, you'll encounter puppets made of sturdier fleece, meriting the use of the additional weapons you get like these letter grenades and this shoddy, the Novelist. I like that. The Novelist. You'll even contend with a handful of bosses. They're short encounters, but they're fun encounters, like this fight with a living wall of puppets that projectile fires other puppets at you. Still, I kind of wish I started on a harder setting. I found that it only takes a little bit of scrounging to end up with a lot of bit of ammo, making my normal playthrough pretty breezy, even with the constantly reviving puppets afoot. Although, again, I think that quality lends itself to this being a kid-friendly intro to survival horror, albeit one that leans more into action horror than anything else. If you're looking for puppets with bite, there's harder, difficult to choose from, and even challenge runs you can undertake, you know, the good stuff RE fans are sure to eat up, like finishing the game without healing or saving and going after the highest letter in the alphabet, S. But I think the game is at its best when you're exploring and solving puzzles. The C&B is such a great location. It's imaginative and interconnected, filled with history and satire. It's like walking through a Bioshock parody where instead of ornate statues exalting Andrew Ryan, it's Junebug, Norman, and George. No gods, no kings, only puppets. There's a nice flow to the game's disparate areas, which can all eventually be accessed from the main courtyard you start off in. There's some clever set pieces baked seamlessly into the levels too. Early in, there's this huge soundstage with a big bird. You're tasked with finding an assortment of letters to progress, which are strewn all up and down the set. Slinking around enemies, searching for key items, solving puzzles, and trying to keep away from Birdo here is a great mixture of all the game's elements. It made me forget that the worst these puppets can do is push you over and shake at you. Later, you'll discover an entire portion of the game made of cardboard. It's a child's rendition of the adult world, and it's so well done, dude. I adored this little section that had me make believe that I was really cooking using cardboard ingredients. It's simple and ingenious, a quality you'll find in the puzzle design too. None of them are mind renders, so to speak. Usually the answer is staring you right in the face, but they're clever enough, varied, interactive, and they let you test what works and what doesn't. I was, however, humbled by a children's board game, and I don't want to fucking talk about it. Not everything in the game is spoon-fed to you, though. You have to stray off the beaten path to find these tapes that unlock cheats for replays. And you can even rattle off optional objectives that actually affect the story, if you're willing to poke around. And it's worth it. Let's talk about the story for a spell, since it's arguably one of the game's greatest strengths. While Gordon's adventure begins in '93, the narrative really starts in 1968, when the first episode of My Friendly Neighborhood aired. It was an instant hit, capturing the imagination of children while imparting valuable life lessons. That success snowballed into movies, merchandise, and many more episodes featuring the lovable neighbors. But outside of their idyllic neighborhood, war loomed. The war in the northern continent wouldn't end until 1972, 20 years after it began, but not before claiming 100,000 lives. It being the first televised war had ramifications on the public consciousness. I feel like there might be a real-world parallel here. I don't know what it is. TV audiences lost their taste for wholesome programming and began to gravitate toward more mature media, entertainment that reflected the graphic images they were used to seeing during the war. City network broadcasting began to see MFN as archaic, and one of the show's tones switched up. Ratings languished in the early 80s as the children of the televised war preferred watching crime shows and dramas. Meanwhile, a rich son of a bitch named Ronald Richbacher started buying control of the surrounding city after it suffered an economic crash. He evicted anyone who didn't fit his vision of the future and prioritized his pocket lining over consumer interest. The city fell into sorrow. On set, the show's human lead, Richie, got bonked so hard by a puppet he ended up quitting. After a string of box office duds and waning ratings, My Friendly Neighborhood was finally canceled, and C&B just left those puppets behind. This whole setup lives in the periphery of the story at first, but becomes more prominent as you investigate the City Network Hotel. You learn that Gordon's cheery disposition comes from not only serving, but having been honored for his bravery in the war.
Got that in the war. Last time I stick my neck out for someone.
And it's a bit of a sore spot for him.
Or maybe a GI. Give you a chance to rampage through some small defenseless...
Don't say that, Ricky.
Say what?
Don't talk about the war.
While he isn't a fan of this ordeal or the jabberheads knocking him about, he softens up the more he interacts with them. Gordon learns that even the most intimidating puppets he encounters are more docile than they seem. If you go out of your way to find certain items throughout the game, you can help some of these wayward neighbors. You see that Pearl the bird wasn't hunting for prey? She was looking for her glasses. Ray just needed to see that there's more to handiwork than bonking shit. Sometimes a mean dog is just a hungry dog. And sometimes, when someone's lonely, they just need someone else to be friendly. When Gordon extends his kindness, it opens up old feelings for him too. He starts to remember a part of himself he's forgotten, the person he was before the war. And you learn who these puppets were before all this too. See, the neighbors have always been highly impressionable. Hell, there's warnings all over set illustrating that, like this poster asking crew members to refrain from swearing around them. Naturally, they were never allowed to watch TV either. And, naturally, it was the first thing they did when the studio shut down. But what they saw horrified them, and their little puppet minds reeled. It drove them to become the lost and yammering souls you see today. I think this is an interesting swerve away from the tropes of mascot horror. These guys don't want to devour children or steal their souls. They just want to sing and dance and be happy. They're not trying to take over the world with their broadcasts. They think they're helping it. The world's gotten dark and they're just trying to brighten it up. There's actually a few choices you can make before the game's over. You can choose to drive away before the job's done and the neighborhood and its puppets become a distant memory. You also get fired, which sucks, but fuck that job. If you do see your work through though, and manage to help puppets along the way, you're rewarded with this horrible fucking monstrosity. It's like Jim Henson presents The Thing. But after that, Ricky asks you for a big favor. He wants you to help run the studio. You could say no. Go back to your old life, you even get a big repairman promotion. Or you could take a chance and see where the store leads. And wouldn't you know it, My Friendly Neighborhood is back. It's on public access TV, but that's actually where the show started, when it was called Ricky and Friends. And the response is good. Gordon's at peace. The world's a little bit brighter, a little bit friendlier. Your job still fires you because, you win the show business with sentient puppets, but seriously, fuck that job. I had a wonderful time with My Friendly Neighborhood. It's clever, funny, extremely polished, and best of all, it's well written. I expected to settle for a couple hours of silly puppet blasting action, but I didn't expect the game to be so touching, and I certainly didn't expect to walk away with a newfound favorite.